Hey, welcome to our webcast today. Thanks for joining us. I'm David Hadibus, President and CEO of CCNG, and today we are talking about customer experience and specifically how and why companies are transforming to be more CX-driven in their organizations. Our discussion today is with two senior leaders at Aria Solutions. That would be Noel Roberts, their CTO, and Jamie Coutts, their Vice President of Client Relationships. And both of these gentlemen have a wealth of knowledge and perspectives on the subject of customer engagement and driving improvements in the area of customer experience. Today they're going to cover and we will discuss 6 essential competencies businesses must establish before and during their optimization process to deliver the right CX mix time after time. We've planned about 50 to 60 minutes for today's virtual discussion. And note, I keep using the word discussion because we want people to be a part of this. We will start with the content presented by Noel and Jamie, and then we'll take your questions through the end of the webcast today. During any time in the webcast, you can use the question box on your screen to submit your questions to us. Any questions that we don't have time to address during the webcast, we will carry over into the online discussion group we've created for participants of today's webcast. I'll have more information about that near the end of the webcast today. So there is a good deal of discussion and conversation by CCNG members about the silos and silos in contact center operations. Shortly, we will have a poll question for you today. And the poll question is around siloed contact center systems or systems that support the contact center. And the results of this poll will be discussed right around the beginning of our Q&A. We encourage you all to participate. It makes it a lot of fun. So everyone will have access to the information at the end of the webcast today. So that's our setup. Gentlemen, welcome. Thanks for taking time with us today. I'm going to forward our slides so everyone can see who we're dealing with and turn it over to you two to get us started. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks very much, David. It's Noel Roberts here, CTO at Aria. And yeah, for our discussion this morning, we're going to be talking about the 6 essential competencies that we feel are necessary for successful customer experience transformations. Let's see. All right, so since we're going to be talking about CX transformation, the first thing that we need to do is to be clear about what we mean by CX. So customer experience is really what customers feel when engaging with your organization. It's that emotional response. And if your goal is to have that excellent customer experience, then you need to focus on how you engage with your customers in order to be able to influence how they feel. So you don't really directly control that customer experience. You do so through the engagements that you have. So why do a CX transformation in the first place? Well, from a customer perspective, the power has really shifted to customers because of the disruption with the fast-changing technology that's out there. And this is making customers, as we all know, self-sufficient and more demanding. And that's why we tend to refer to this as being the age of the customer. But the behavior has actually changed to a point where there's what's sometimes called hyper-adoption, which is really a new level of consumer behavior where customers are much more quickly and easily willing to switch between brands. And so that's adding to the challenge that we have. So that's from the customer side of things, but so while customers are more demanding, what we've been seeing is that organizations are not often providing that excellent CX. And as we've been talking to analysts, we've found that really almost nobody is providing that excellent level of customer experience. And even those few that are really good at it or great at it have room for improvement. So this means that customer experience is a real opportunity for organizations to differentiate themselves. It's a key thing now with CX being that opportunity, because in the past you could differentiate yourselves through mastering manufacturing or distribution or even later on information, but that's mattering less now than it used to. So you really have a significant opportunity here, and the time is really right to talk about a customer experience transformation. So let's also be clear that there are hard benefits, obviously, from doing a transformation. Driving better customer experience does actually correlate with business performance. Customer-centric companies do experience revenue growth, higher margins, and reduced costs. And the research has actually shown that when customers have a better experience, their intentions do tend to be to stay with the brand longer and buy more from that brand and make recommendations. So this shows that customer transformation can really help your business. All right. Bit of a lag, but okay, that's good. Yeah. So CX transformation is what we need. So how do we do that? Well, an organization really needs to have those 6 essential competencies and needs to develop them. And each of these competencies, they need to be established. We need to set them up and make them work, but they also need to be ongoing, and they need to operate in a consistent way. So it's not good enough just to do them periodically, but it's also important to have them in that ongoing and consistent way. Okay. So the first competency you want to look at is around research. And research is really required in order to know who your customers are and what they want. Also look at your competitors and how they operate in the market, as well as to look out for any sort of disruptive competitors, such as what Uber was for taxis or Airbnb for hotels. So you need to establish that strong research team, if there isn't one already, and have that team initially look at the customer wants and needs. So what do customers want from you in your industry? Why do they buy from you? Who else is delivering what you deliver? And as mentioned, is there a disruptor? The other thing the team needs to look at is customer communication. So you need to look at your customers and how they like to communicate with you and in general. Communicate with peers and what channels that they use, as well as what level of personalization is expected. The team also needs to look at how proficient customers are at self-service. Things like, where do they do their research? Do they search on Google, Amazon, or look at communities such as on Facebook groups, that sort of thing? Where do they get their opinions and recommendations? So then the next thing is to track customers' experiences over time. So this is where you're trying to pick up the changes in behavior and communication, trying to see how customers are changing. For example, are they mentioning competitors more when they're talking to your competitor products? That sort of thing. And you'll need to also gather unsolicited feedback. So look for keywords, keyword tracking, and quality assurance tools, and look at your existing measurements. So surveys that you might be doing today and customer satisfaction scores, and see if you can see any patterns in how customers are changing in their behavior. And as you find issues or those areas of concern, then researchers might have to take a deeper dive and try and figure out what more is going on there. So this takes time, so you have to allow time for this research, this more proactive research to take place. And it's likely to include things like live interviews or specialized or targeted surveys, maybe even focus groups in order to get at that deeper information and find out the changes that you might be detecting in your customers. Next thing is you need to communicate the research. So research needs to be, in order for it to be useful, it needs to drive action with your employees. So it's good to communicate your understanding of customers and their changing behavior to agents, as this will give them a good understanding of what you're seeing with customers, and they can adopt and change and see how they can change the way they engage with customers. And also communicating obviously with executives is going to be important so that those customer changes can be seen and measure the impact to the business, and see what other approaches or changes or even new business options might come out of it. So in order to reach kind of that full competency, it's not enough to just establish research or establish really any of the competencies and just sort of get that stood up. But the research does need to be ongoing, and it does need to be consistent, and you have to have that routine in place in order to properly detect the changes. If it's sort of ad hoc or not in a regular way, then it's likely that it'll be harder to interpret the data that you get. It's also going to be important to have accountability, so have a senior person who owns research, and it's also important that cooperation exists between groups. And as an example, you might consider even expanding your pool of researchers by extending things to agents. Get your agents involved. Since they're directly connected with customers, they can provide feedback to you about what customers are saying or doing. And there could be even simple things like a field added to their desktop application or CRM application that allow the agent to track certain information. And you might want to do that with just your senior agents or a core group of agents to get that sample rate. But that's something that you can do to help the research. We also want to leverage some new tools to accelerate that move from research to action and to get more depth from your information. So tools such as AI can help with this and help look for patterns. A little slow on that. Sorry, with the changing of the slide. There we go. Yeah, so next is on prioritization. So it's important to not try and fix everything, but to prioritize with what's important to your customers. And what's more is to even prioritize and start with what's important to your most valuable customers. And then from that is to align those priorities with your business values and success criteria so that you can really look at where you need to focus your change. So start with prioritizing your most important customer groups. So prioritize them based on things like look at their propensity to churn, how well established are they with you, how much do they buy from you, and whether there are recommendations that they make, and look at that angle from the customer perspective. And the next is to look at interactions and journeys and which are the most important to them. So, for example, on interactions, what channels do they use? Does the personalization go far enough? How proficient are they at self-service? Are you providing them with the access information that they're looking for? And on the journey side is to look at the effort that it takes for customers to complete a task or a transaction, to try and understand that ease factor and how easy is it and smooth for them to get a task or a transaction completed with your organization. Okay, sorry about that. So the next thing to look at too is to focus on how you allocate your company resources. So what's most important for the organization could be things like new technology, changes to to the processes. Those could be things that you might want to focus on that provide that value for improving customer experience. And then also operational changes. So it might just be that certain channels are favored more than others, and as you recognize that, you might need to shift resources around to better allocate them to channels that the customers prefer. And then you're going to want to develop a timeline and a roadmap for these changes that you've prioritized and focus on them, considering the constraints that there might be in the organization as well as the opportunities that you see. And then look for things that can be done in parallel. So adding new channels and personalization capabilities on a smaller level, even while you launch new bigger initiatives.
Once you've completed your research and your prioritization, then you're ready to start in on the designing of the right customer engagements to drive the experiences that you want. And there's really a three-step process for this. You want to create the ideas, which you may want to bring in some of your most creative people from your different teams. Those have been working with customers for a long time. But the most important thing in creating the ideas is they need to be in the customer's view, not the business's view. So really keeping in mind, what would the customer want in this engagement? What kind of experience are we really trying to drive here? And really that needs to be the core of each idea. Once you've got your ideas created, then you'll want to prototype them, and that can be a prototyping process. It can also be prototyping a particular system. If it's a system, the good news is there are a number of products in the market today that are very easy to use that can create prototypes in hours or minutes in sandboxes and areas that are very easy to work with. So you might invite in your best people. You might even bring in some customers while you're doing these prototypes, and it can be a bit of an interactive session, because prototyping, I guess many people know, especially if you're trying to build more advanced engagements, you can't get it right the first time. You're going to need to tweak things. You're going to need to roll your sleeves up with the prototyping team and then test it with the customer and then go through this process several times until you get it right. And that's the key, is really walking through this multiple times. Once you're finished design, then you're ready for enablement. And enablement can often be the most difficult step. As many of you know, changing processes within large organizations, especially where there are complex procedures that are in place today in large teams, is not easy. The same goes for systems, and this is perhaps the hardest one, where you're going to want to modernize your systems by ensuring the business and contact center applications are updated and fully integrated. Some of the steps in updating are to remove the silos. As David mentioned earlier, a number of companies have many, many silos. So you either want to remove them or you're going to want to integrate them together to fix the broken customer journeys and the different systems that are holding you back. The other thing in modernization is you want to pick systems that are adjustable and adaptable, because customer experience is a journey. Your customers' experience and their expectations will be different a year from now and 5 years from now. So you want to make sure that your systems can adapt to those changing needs and that your team can roll out the changes in the engagements to meet your customers' changing demands. So the systems are perhaps the hardest part. It can take a long time, and as Noel mentioned, you want to prioritize, you want to also have a roadmap. But the good news is that companies are making progress here, and even in their first year, they're seeing significant benefits along the journey. But of course, it's better than the alternative, which is not really providing the best customer experience. And then once the systems and processes have been created and are ready to be rolled out, you want to provide your employees with information and training to support the experiences across all touch points. And I saw a customer do this very well. They had a very large project. They held a big party in a big hall, and they announced from the executives why they were doing the project, what customer experiences they were trying to create, and a lot of the background and the research. And then they moved into talking about what the changes were going to be and what it meant to the different departments. And then they sent out champions from the project team to each department to work with them to enable the changes. And it was very successful. So change management, of course, as many companies have, is very important in this whole process. So what are silos? As many of you probably have already experienced, there are many applications in the contact center that don't work together, and that's essentially what a silo is. It's where you might have, if you can see up in the left-hand corner, your voice channels are not really working in harmony with your outbound dialers or your website, or perhaps you've launched an SMS application that's a specialty application where that information doesn't necessarily get transmitted to the agents who are receiving inbound voice calls. So in this diagram, all the green are some examples of interaction channels that we've seen customers have that can be silos. In the blue, these are the back-end systems that the agents have to use to serve the customers, and they can be a whole variety of systems, from legacy systems, billing, CRM, and others. And of course, in the purple, as many of you are familiar with, the analytics and reporting and workforce management systems are the core to enable the management team to see what's going on in the center and to drive it forward in terms of performance. We've seen customers have anywhere from typically 5 to 10 silos. I've even come across a customer who had over 30. It was incredible how many different systems that the agents and management had to navigate, and of course the customers had to repeat themselves when they were in an IVR to the agent, or what they were doing on the website to an agent, and so forth. So contact centers with application silos are definite barriers to progress. Now I'm going to hand it over to Noel to give you an example of one of his experiences with silos.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So we thought that an example I had not too long ago with an airline might be a good silo example here, which is I was traveling for a conference and was checking in with the airline, and I wanted to book an upgrade, and the web was offering me an ability to upgrade my seat either to a more legroom or even to business class. And as I tried to book it, it wouldn't process my credit card, and I'd exit and re-enter and go back in, and I could still see that there are spots available. So I had to call in, and calling in, besides taking 40 minutes, I got to the agent, who basically informed me that she couldn't see any of the options on her end, and therefore there were no options. And I was telling her that I could see them, I could see seats available, and she wasn't particularly, not just was she not able to see what I was seeing in terms of availability, she basically went as far as to tell me that I had the option to choose my seats at the time of booking. And as we all know, those who travel a fair bit, is you also do get the option at the time of check-in. So she was not particularly helpful, and so it was a good indication of a siloed problem that they were having, as well as maybe a good example of what not to do for leaving a customer with a good experience. Go back to you, Jamie.
The good news is that silos can be eliminated or integrated, and I'll talk about that in a moment. David?
All right, well, let's take a moment here to catch our breath and do our poll question. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. We hear a lot about silos in discussions. We hear a lot about barriers. We hear a lot about silos as barriers. This is a great question because it reads, which of these contact center systems are siloed in your operation? And again, it's pretty easy peasy. Interaction channels, customer business systems, reporting and analytics, or one or more of the above. So I will leave the poll question up here for a minute or two, encourage all of you to participate. We'll share the results right around the beginning of Q&A. And Jamie, let me turn it back over to you.
Thanks, David. Okay, so removing silos is a process where you want to logically look at your different applications and group them into 3 different types of systems. So this is really a process that organizes your systems into different functions. So on the left, the first type of function is what we call a system of engagement. So you'll want to look at all of the omni-channel engagements that you want to provide your customers. See what applications that you have today that are good and flexible. Maybe there are some that aren't, that you may need to leave behind, and then you might need to select some new applications, some new products, to be able to round out what engagements that you want to provide your customer. So you would pick the right platforms, applications to bring them together into a system engagement to make sure that you're going to have consistent, seamless engagements with your customer. Then on the right, you'll want to take a look at your back-end systems such as CRM, billing, and so forth, and determine what information that you're going to need the agents to have or your automated systems to have to serve the customers in those engagements. And we call that really a system of record. So bringing those applications together. Again, some of the legacy applications may not fit. You might have to select some new ones. And then finally, for management, looking at the reporting and analytics requirements that you're going to have a complete view of the contact center, all the interactions and all the agents, all the channels and so forth, into what we call a system of insight. Once you've done that, then you'll want to do an integration project where you bring everything together into one customer engagement solution. And it's important to note that this isn't one product. There isn't one product that can do everything typically. Maybe for simpler centers they can, but in most organizations we've worked with, it's going to take a number of applications, both legacy and new, that have to be brought together by systems integrators, either internally or externally or combination, to bring these together so that from a system of engagement point of view, you have a perfectly seamless interaction with your customer as they move between the different channels, so that you don't have the experiences that Noel identified and the ones that we all see every day when we get broken CX. And you'll want to have fully integrated customer service or customer records of the history of what the customer was doing, all of the different things that they were doing, the cases, and so forth. And then finally, a place where management can see that everything in the center is going on and that it's performing to their expectations.
All right, and then the 5th measurement or competency that we're going to look at is measurement. And to be competent at measurement, an organization is going to need to systematically quantify the quality of customer experiences. So you're going to need to measure the quality of the experiences by finding out how positive customers feel about the engagements that they have with your organization. And then you're going to need to gather enough quantity or volume in order to make the measurement statistically significant. And then you're going to need to link the quality metrics and operational metrics to your goal metrics, like customer satisfaction or CSAT score. So when quality and operational metrics go up or down, you can look at those very, very quickly, and it's what allows you to react quickly, knowing that those adjustments that you make are going to have an impact on the overall goal metrics because of that linkage. So a key quality method that's in use today is customer surveys. And the problem today that we have with customer surveys is that requests are looking like they're more frequently ignored now than they used to be. And even when people accept and go through a survey, we're finding that the data that's being provided is more scarce than it used to be. And this, we think, is in large part because customers are increasingly feeling like it doesn't really provide them much value. They're not really seeing the outcome, as well as other difficulties like just trying to type on a phone keyboard and that sort of thing. It's kind of reducing some of that data access. So to improve this, we need to look at ways to make it more, make surveying more accessible. So by providing easier access, so make it known that a survey is available and don't impact the screen, like don't have the survey take up and splash in front of everything. Offer it right away at the end of the interaction, such as a phone call, so it's immediately available. But also look at maybe providing some micro surveys sort of as you go. So, for example, if a customer is browsing a web page, you could ask a single question, such as, "Was the information easy to understand?" and do these simple sort of one question micro surveys and increase the data that you get, but not overload with how much you're asking them at once. Next thing to improve it is to make it conversational. Excuse me. And to make it conversational, one of the things that's happening is that chatbots are increasingly used. Voice bots and chatbots, they're used within organizations more and more now to provide self-service. But they also offer a new way to collect information. So as you do deploy more self-service across channels, you can use voice bots as well to execute surveys and to gather information. And they are more conversational because you can talk to them, and as you talk to them through speech, they can collect all the data, transcribe the information that's being said, and all of that information can be captured. And so that gives you much more data than if you got them to type or choose from a set of questions. The way that voice bots work too is they're not as rigid as the typical questions that you might ask in a survey, such as at the end of a call. And that conversational aspect lets them probe a little bit more. It's not about the cut and dry list of questions. You can actually program a chatbot to also sort of wander into deeper areas and maybe go a little further in some ways, and explore more with the customers as they respond. And then, of course, you get the transcript for the whole chat piece, and that can all be stored in your systems for measuring the level of customer experience that's being provided. Another thing to do is consider if it works for your organization is multimodal. So what that means is you could also attach things to surveys or allow information to be provided back to you. So for example, if they're reporting an issue or problem with the product, then maybe what you can do is also allow them to provide a picture. And as people use smartphones more, they usually have a camera available to them, and just add to some of that experience that you get with collecting data. So I also want to look at the tools that you want to use to increase your ability to measure. We mentioned chatbots for improving surveying and capturing information. And the capturing of all the transcripts for data and analysis. The other piece too is AI here as well. So AI is taking root and it's helping analyze data and looking for patterns, and that allows for some of the data that you collect to be a little bit more free form, so that AI can kind of tackle some of that information and look for patterns as well as customer sentiment. And also look at social listening tools. Go look and see what customers are saying about you out on in social networks, and also you can use it to look and see how your brand is responding to what is being said in those social networks. And all that adds to the measurement capacity that you have to better determine and see how you're doing as far as customer experience goes. So on the last of the competencies is regarding culture. And so organizations need to have a culture that is really centered around the customer. You don't want to have to keep reminding agents and other employees of the importance of the customer. You really want to move that to being more ingrained. So you really want to show them that being customer focused yields results. And so part of the influence around culture is around educating. So education about the CX vision. So like even Jamie was mentioning about how with one example, forerunners were sent into different areas to communicate the vision and to help with that area. So that's a form of education that's directly linked to the vision, and it helps with employees and agents in particular with buy-in that you really are trying to move the organization to be customer-centric. And then, of course, you can reinforce the behavior through recognition and rewards for those engagements that yielded excellent customer experience. And as you do this continuously, it will drive employees to think customer first, which is the experience that you want to provide for your customers. And an example I have of this was a different conference actually, but I was quite sick on the last day of the conference and actually just curled up in bed in my hotel room and I ended up calling down and asking for an extended checkout and told them that I was sick and just wanted to sleep until the very last moment where I had to go to the airport. And not just did they extend my stay, but they actually, there was a knock at the door and they actually brought me some chicken soup. So there are these little things where it's an example that it's not just training, it's really becomes part of the culture that people think in a customer-centric way and will do things that might surprise you. So we've covered, changing it. So we've covered the 6 essential competencies that we feel are necessary to have a successful CX transformation. And with all of these 6 competencies, I just wanted to reiterate that there's sort of these 3 stages that you go through. It's establishing yourself in each of these competencies, and establishing is getting that competency to execute with a level of accuracy, so it actually works. There's precision there in the way that those competencies work. And then you want to advance them. You want to move them to that level of regularity and ongoing as ongoing operations and keep the competency going on regular intervals. And then the third thing is really to then sort of step away or step above the competency and look back at it and look for those ways that you can constantly improve the way that you're executing those competencies and learn new things so that you can make changes and constantly improve and stay on top of having those 6 mature competencies. All right, and with that, I think we're at the end.
Wonderful. Well, let me first say thank you for all that content. I've been writing notes, as I'm sure most of the people that are on our webcast today have been doing. Let's kick off with our poll question. So thank you for those of you who participated. And again, the question reads, which of these contact center systems are siloed? 66% of you said one or more. Again, interaction channels, customer business systems, reporting and analytics. The second being reporting and analytics, and the third being interaction channels. So, gentlemen, any thoughts around that? Is that what you expected to see? Is that typical?
Actually, yeah, it's pretty typical. The one or more of the above, so as 2/3 responded that's pretty much bang on what we see. Is the issues with silos across all channels or all technology streams. And the second one being reporting and analytics, we do see that a lot, as what we see is there are digital channels that are sometimes being used within, say, a CRM system, separate from a contact center system, or even marketing, for example, that might be using a completely different system for social media, but also maybe for email and chat than what the customer service team is using. And so those challenges from an interaction level also present reporting problems, as it's really hard to get that sense, especially if you have agents that are trying to operate across all those channels, across those technologies. So yeah, that's pretty typical. It's interesting that only a few people feel that the main siloed system is just with the CRM and billing and those other systems. So there must be some people doing some good integration out there with those back-end systems.
That either that or we have no people who actually use those systems on our webcast today. No, I'm kidding.
I think everybody, yeah. Everybody uses
so,
it.
You know, the questions, and again, I'll remind our audience to use the question box to submit your questions today, and we'll discuss that. It'll be part of the live webcast. That's always fun for everybody. You know, I will just say that in general, the conversations among the CCNG member and colleagues that participate in our programs and events fall into 4 categories: process, people, technology, and dead last but not least, culture. And I really enjoyed your comment about, I believe it was Noel, about avoid mentioning to the customer how important they are. How many times have we been on hold and the hold announcement says, we value you as a customer, and yet we're going to leave you on hold for 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 18 minutes, right? So rather than telling the customer that we think they're important, let's work on that message internally as part of the culture. And I think that was a very big takeaway for me anyway. So I'm going to jump into some questions here, guys. Again, if you have questions, please use the question box. It's pretty easy to use. In the industry, and I'll throw this out to either one of you, Noel or Jamie, you handle it as you deem fit. In the industry today, you know, we hear a lot of conversation about emerging channels. Certainly, raise your hand if you've just gotten an email in the last hour about chatbots. I thought so. Okay, so we hear a lot about emerging channels, but I'd like to know from your perspective, which are the fastest emerging channels that you guys see?
Well, we're definitely seeing chatbots, or even maybe more broadly, those virtual customer assistants, and as being the front runner, and that's probably, there's a couple of things there, but we find that with VCAs or these chatbots, is what it's kind of doing is taking where the speech reco used to be, which was sort of a voice only channel and kind of rigid in its approach, is chatbots are allowing for that more conversational approach, but also allowing it across multiple channels. So your quote-unquote chatbot could be on the voice channel, as well as coming in through, you know, Facebook Messenger or SMS or, you know, Twitter, those sorts of things. So it's opening up the channels, and it's making things more conversational and more approachable. And so that's really, we're expecting a pretty big explosion in that technology over the next 18 months.
The confusion about chatbots, I just want to go back to that for a moment since you touched on it. Can you, again, give us the chatbots 101 understanding of that so that everyone is on the same page? Because from discussions that I've observed, there is still some confusion on what that is and where and what's driving it. Can you expand on that?
And what's driving it? Well, I think there's another paradigm shift that's happening in the industry as we kind of moved from the contact center or call center paradigm to that more sort of an engagement center, where the contact center was, all about efficiency, and we could relate back to like the hide the zero right on the IVR to try and deflect calls and contain calls within the IVR, not very customer focused. And then the shift was then to the engaging customers and being more customer centric. And that's where we're at today. And with that, that's got buried in it a lot of the assisted service. And then the next shift is really then saying, okay, well, we can move a lot of this now to self-service, and we can tackle a lot of self-service now because the chatbots really supported by artificial intelligence at multiple levels. But those chatbots are more capable now, and even on voice are replacing, that technology is really replacing the old style of speech reco that we used to experience with tuning grammars and that sort of thing. So that shift, that next paradigm shift to self-service is really made possible by an advancement in technology that will further enable that self-service in a customer experience positive way. So that's one sort of major trend that I think is happening. And then I think you're asking maybe a bit more about chatbots themselves, David. I wasn't quite sure on that. Yeah. So chatbots themselves as a technology, like why they're vastly improved, is in large part due to that artificial intelligence piece. So you can call in to a contact center, and instead of having your IVR typically handle it through typical speech reco, you could hand that off to a chatbot. And there are a lot of technology platforms out there by Google and Amazon, in particular, and Microsoft, that have advanced tools pretty well. And what they've really done is used artificial intelligence to at three different levels, really. First level is the brute force of just all the voice sampling that they can pick up and better recognize words that people speak. And then as they convert that to text, then the next step is understanding the text contextually, like understanding what's really being said, and matching that to what they call intents, so what is intended by what's being said. And then you can have rules at that point that can tie into the back end systems and get things done, like pay a bill or what have you. But further to that, there's a third level, which is not quite well established, of artificial intelligence, which is looking at those intents, so not building the rules and learning from what the customer's behavior and patterns are. So that one's more emerging. We don't see that much of it yet, but that's coming. And then if you look at things like these platforms, when you build a bot, they can be supported across multiple channels, typically with the same technology. So Amazon, for example, supports Facebook Messenger and SMS as well as voice. So you don't have to build a separate solution if you're going to expand your bot across those channels. So that's where the chatbots make it easier, is when you build that self-service capability, you can also just move it across other channels right away.
We have a question. We have a question on chatbots, and I want to get to it while you're on this subject. I'll read it to you. It says, with chatbots, how are these effective with the majority of systems being siloed or not integrated? They need to be integrated to back-end systems to access customer data. Is that correct?
Yeah, they do. And so what we find is, so first off, I would say that the chatbots are kind of at an adolescent stage right now, which means it's still relatively experimental. But a lot of companies are experimenting and doing that. And so in that experimental stage, the main thing is not to tackle a huge a huge piece of self-service all at once. So you might have actually multiple chatbots even that you build, or multiple elements where each one focuses on a much narrower scope. And by focusing on a narrower scope, like billing or bill payments, let's say, then you're really then narrowing the systems that you also have to integrate with. And so you don't have to do the cross. Typically, you don't have to cross all your customer systems to get value from chatbots. You will want to tackle it in a narrower way, and then evolve that over time. The other thing that's going to happen to you is that chatbots is you're also going to progress. There's going to be a lower number of lower percentage of self-service in the beginning, and then you'll get better at it over time, even within those specialist chatbots. So, but the value there.
Go ahead. Finish up. I want to get to the next question.
I was going to say just that the value definitely is there. We're seeing an awful lot of interest there.
Yep. There was a reference to prototyping and implementing prototyping. Can you circle back on that and discuss it from how would an organization properly go about that?
Sure. Maybe I'll take that one, Noel. I think what you want to do is set up an R&D environment. It doesn't have to be the systems that you have in place today. It can actually be other ones that allow you to build things quickly and change things quickly. So you'd want to select your prototyping tools carefully. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, as this is a journey, you want to have people that are used to creating new concepts that are more innovative than the others. So you might even want to have a specialty team that gets together for certain functions that has a regular process of using the prototype environment. And then I think you can also have an environment where you invite customers in, and you can work with them, obviously bringing in agents as well and management team members to show them what the prototypes are. So that would be my recommendation.
Let me jump to the next question. When you implement solutions, we've talked about silos and application silos. What's the most common application silo that you guys are seeing?
Noel, do you want me to answer that one, or maybe both? Why don't you go first, and then I'll add mine.
The most common application silos, I think that I see is there's probably a couple of them, but the reporting and the channels would probably be the two that are the most common. I mean, the channels one is usually there because there are different departments. So I've seen, for example, marketing choose a different tool than customer service, and they might even be going across the same channel. They might be dealing with emails in some cases, but we also see that, for example, marketing might open up a new channel like a social media channel, such as Facebook or Twitter, and if they're not ready or weren't expecting the sort of customer service angle to the channels that they've opened, then we run into a big pain point is usually that handoff between marketing to customer service for customer service issues that come over those marketing-initiated channels. Then the other one is between voice and digital channels. We see a typical silo there where you might be using even an older phone system for voice and other technology for digital. And so then you run into lots of issues with agents if you're blending your agents together. And then, of course, if you're doing all of that, have those kinds of silos, then that leads to your reporting silos because the different systems will have their different reporting. So then actually we're just trying to solve this for a client now with some custom integration data where they're having a tough time viewing agent occupancy, true agent occupancy, because their agents are across channels. So that leads to the reporting piece, plus whatever other issues you might have with reporting tools themselves and multiple tools there. So I know Jamie have.
Maybe I'll add one really quickly because I know we're coming up to the end here. I've seen several customers who have Pitney Bowes systems that are sending out mailers, different statements and information to customers through the mail, and agents have no idea what's being sent. So that's a very traditional silo that has been around for a long time. And then email, I think, would also be there because a lot of departments have their own email processes to communicate with customers, and the agents just never know those emails go out.
Yeah, it's pretty typical. I've seen it too. Okay, so with the bonus question, you got 30 seconds. Which of these 6 competencies do you feel is the one that kind of is most important for organizations to focus on to get started?
So I only get one. I think I'm going to take 2. I'm going to take 2.
Cheater.
I think, well, research first and measurement, I think, are the 2, because you really have to have that groundwork figured out before you know what to prioritize and focus on and design and build. And so I think those are the 2 most important. And then the culture will be something that you have to work on ongoing. But yeah, research. If I had to pick one, it'd be research first, and then measurement. And they are kind of connected anyways. So
sure. Jamie, you have any disagree, agree?
I agree. Yeah.
Good answer, Jamie. Good answer. Well, listen, we need to wrap it up, and I appreciate you guys taking so much time. It's a big topic. There's a lot of sub-questions and subplots and, on and on and on. And as I mentioned, we have a chatter group that we have invited everyone that's on the live webcast to participate in. We encourage you to do so. If you haven't joined it, join it. And you'll see that invite via email. If you have any troubles, circle back with us and we'll get you another email invite. It's a great place to continue the conversation. Certainly, if you didn't get a question asked or answered today, we're glad to take time, and Jamie and Noel will be a part of that group as well. Please note that your chatter login is not your email address, so pay attention when you get that notification. I also want to let people know that we have our new customizable CCNG resource channel called Customer Contact Central. It's now available for all of you listening to this webcast today. So if you're a blogger, we welcome your content. This is individual perspectives. We don't care which side of the fence or on the fence you sit on. Your perspectives on any of this subject matter that we're discussing today or anything relating to contact center and customer care is more than welcome. So as we wrap up the webcast, I'm going to remind you all and encourage you all to share the webcast with your colleagues, as the link will be made available shortly. And you can also share your thoughts today about the webcast on Twitter. Please use @Aria Solutions, @CCNG Network, and we'll wrap it up there. So gentlemen, thank you both for taking time. It was valuable, beyond value, and I cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. So thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, bye now.